Okay, so it's 3:03, so I'll go ahead and get started. I like to be respectful of everybody's time. So welcome. My name is Stephanie Will. I am the Mental Health Services Program Manager here at Montgomery College, and I work with our Student Health and Wellness Center for Success. Hopefully everyone has heard of the Shaw Center at this point. I think we've done some really good job in marketing in the last year or so. So we are not just mobile market group. People are finding out all the different things that we do, like our student support groups that we offer, all these different types of educational workshops, the Sexual Assault Awareness Month activities that my colleague has been doing. Yeah, we do a little bit of everything, including mental health first aid certification training. So as we're getting close to finals, that's a stressful time, not just for our students, but also our faculty and staff as our semester is wrapping up as well. And there's lots of papers to grade and preparing for the next bout of registration and summer and all that good stuff. So yeah, Momina.
When does the spring semester end, by the way?
I believe the last week of classes is the week of May 3rd, if I remember correctly. And I think finals is the week after that.
I don't know myself, so that's why I was just curious.
Yeah, no, I've kind of lost count. This has been like the fastest April, I think, in my entire life. So
yeah,
it's either the week of May 3rd or the following week, I believe, is the last week of classes. So we're getting into the end at this time. So yeah, it goes by quickly, and there's a lot going on, especially with all the 7-week classes. I know that's kind of sped up the process for a lot of people. So yeah, we wanted to bring this this presentation to everybody as best we could. So like I said, I will have the chat up. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to put some stuff in the chat. And I apologize, my door is going to slam in about 3 seconds because the window is open. We got a nice breeze come through. My cat Henry might join us at some point in time. So we'll see. It'll be a fun afternoon for everybody. So today we're going to be talking about managing stress with mindfulness. I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a nice practical experience. I like to make sure that we are taking away something other than just information. While information is good, it's nice to have some skills when we walk out of these presentations. So we're going to talk a little bit about stress, its impacts on our body and our brain. We'll talk a little bit about what mindfulness is. It's kind of become a buzzword in the last couple of years, and everyone's talking about being mindful and doing mindfulness meditations and all this kind of stuff. So many of us are aware of it, but not quite sure exactly what it is. We're going to do a guided mindfulness meditation, and then we'll talk about different ways that we can incorporate mindfulness into our daily self-care routine, because we should all have a daily self-care routine, even if it's just a couple minutes every day. So stress is something that unites us all. It is something that every single person on this planet experiences. If you have found a way to not experience stress, I want to know what your secret is. I have yet to get to that point in my life, but not all stress is bad. We often think of stress as something that's very negative and makes us exhausted and tired. But there is such a thing as good stress, something that we call eustress. And this is actually stress that helps us focus and get what we need to do done. Good stress comes from activities or classes or projects that we know are going to be hard, but we know that we can cope. We know that we have the skills and we can learn and we can grow from those experiences. So if you are a engineering major and you are getting ready to take a class that is going to be particularly difficult, but you're like, you know what, it's going to be hard, but I'm excited about this class. I know that it's going to really challenge me. I know I'm going to learn a lot from this class. You might feel stressed throughout the process, but that's probably that good stress. That's that stress that is helping us move forward emotionally and mentally in our lives. Whereas the bad stress is the stress that we generally think of when we talk about stress. And that's when it's frequent and it's intense and we're experiencing a lot of physical side effects. We're experiencing a lot of mental exhaustion and strain. And when you get to the end of whatever that activity was that's stressing you out, you're not like, oh yeah, man, look at this. I did it. I accomplished this. You're just drained. Your motivation may gone. You might be exhausted. You may end up getting sick. I remember back when I was in school, I swear the end of every single semester, I would make it through finals, get home and be like, yes, I have time to relax, and then be sick for 2 weeks because my immune system was like, okay, no, we're done. This was too much stress. So that's kind of that negative stress. A lot of people talk about stress and heart disease. And on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how stress can impact us physically, because it's increasing the hormones in our body, things like adrenaline and cortisol, which are necessary hormones that help us in that fight or flight response. So if we are in a stressful situation, ancient humans, we're in front of a saber-toothed tiger and we've either got to fight this thing off or we've got to run to save our lives, right? That's when that adrenaline, that cortisol starts kind of pumping through our bodies, and because we got to figure out how to stay alive in this moment. Well, unfortunately, our caveman brains are still active in a society where we don't come up against any saber-toothed tigers anymore. So things that are probably shouldn't be a life or death situation can still kind of activate that stress system in our body. And it can put our intense pressure on our heart rate, and on our cardiovascular system in general. So it is something to be aware of, that, if we know, we're having high blood pressure, or maybe we're experiencing some heart palpitations. I remember in college, I had that a little bit, and my doctor was like, reduce your stress and caffeine. I'm like, I'm a college student. I live on stress and caffeine, right? But knowing that these things do impact us physically. So I want you guys to take a second and, drop in the chat or shout out, whatever feels good to you. It's important, and part of mindfulness is really knowing what are the signs that tell me that I am too stressed. What are the things that are going on in my body? What's going on with me mentally? That if I tune into that, if I notice these, maybe some signs or symptoms, I can say, you know what, I really am too stressed. So, take a second and think about it, and, feel free to put it in the chat. What are your signs? For me personally, muscle tension is a big one. If all of a sudden my neck and my shoulders feel really tight, and I take a moment and I kind of check in with my body, I'm like, oh, okay, there's probably some stress going on here. Whether or not I'm aware of the event or the thing that's stressing me out, I can feel it in my body. For me, also, irritability is a big thing. If I start feeling really short with people, or if I feel like I'm snapping at people, I'm probably really stressed out about something. Motivation is a huge one that I've seen from students and from faculty and staff over the last year. The pandemic has been really tough on all of us. And, lack of motivation isn't laziness. Sometimes it's things that we want to do, things that we know we should do, things that we know will feel better when we do them. But that energy that it requires to actually get up and do those things can be really overwhelming. So I'm seeing problems sleeping, inability to concentrate, feeling overwhelmed, dehydrated, staying up all night. Yeah, all of these things. And especially for students, the things that you all need to do is, be able to pay attention in class, be able to pay attention when you're, reading through different assignments, and then remember those things so you can use them on tests and papers, right? And those are some of the things that get interrupted when we're feeling too stressed also. Yeah, stress eating is absolutely a thing. Food can actually be very comforting. And for some people, when they're feeling upset about something, food is kind of like their go-to coping skill. And that may be fine in certain circumstances, but if a person's really feeling chronic stress, that can cause a whole different set of issues going on with them. So, when we talk about some coping skills, again, having a piece of chocolate when you're, having a bad day, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But, being aware of what we're doing and making sure that it's not turning into a disordered eating pattern such as binge eating. Okay. Anybody else can think of any sorts of signs of stress for like you personally? Okay, that's cool. All right, so yeah, the reason why we talk about these signs of stress, and this really goes hand in hand with that mindfulness. Mindfulness is checking in with ourselves. It's being aware of what's going on, being present. And by knowing what our signs are and being mindful of our signs, we're able to help manage our stress better. Because if we think about it, say like on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you're not stressed at all, 10 being the most stressed that you've ever been in your whole life. If you don't realize you're stressed until you're at like an 8, 9, or 10, when you start to put those coping skills into play, it's not going to bring you back down to a 1 or 2, right? Coping skills don't make the stressful event go away. It just helps our body, take a break. It helps our body and our brain kind of separate itself from the stressor for a minute. And when we're able to give ourselves a little bit of a break, we can go back and tackle that stressful event, right? So if we're waiting until we're an 8 or a 9 or a 10 to start doing any of those coping skills, it's going to be really hard to bring us back down to a manageable level. But if we're able to be mindful, if we're able to check in with our body, check in with, our emotions, and we're noticing that, maybe we're starting to feel like a 3, 4, or 5 on that stress scale, when we then put our coping skills into play, it's going to be able to bring us down. So, we don't turn into that, pot that's overflowing on the stove. One of the other things about stress management that's really important is knowing how to stop it before it starts. And that sounds a little counterintuitive sometimes, but especially since the pandemic, this is one of the things that I have been really passionate about, and I really try to bring to everybody, is just understanding that there are many things in this life we cannot control, right? I don't think anybody expected COVID to happen. That was a surprise for everybody. So when we're planning our course loads, when we are at our jobs and we're thinking about what committees we want to join, or clubs and things like that, we want to make sure that we're not scheduling ourselves to 100% of our capacity, because then when things like COVID happen, or even somebody in the family gets sick, or a class turns out to be a lot harder than you expected it to. I had surgery on my ankle back in February. That was not an entire surprise, but it's not something that you would necessarily be able to plan for all the time. And if we've already scheduled ourselves at 100% of our capacity when these things happen, we're already unable to cope. We're already past what we are able to handle. So really learning about yourself, really thinking about, what can I handle? I already have all these other things going on in my life right now. Maybe this is a semester that I want to take it easy and maybe take some easier courses. Or if I know I have to take this really hard course that I'm going to struggle with, maybe not taking another really hard course along with it. So really trying to do some of that planning beforehand, scheduling ourselves to maybe about 75% of our capacity, so that when these unexpected things happen, we're able to, cope a little bit better in those environments. Another stress management tool, making sure that we're having a conversation with the people around us that can help us. So, if we are struggling in a class, and there's a very individualistic piece to American culture, where we feel like we have to do it ourselves. We have to just be independent. I can do this, and we don't tend to talk to people until it's too late, right? So if we wait until the last 2 weeks of class to say, I'm so overwhelmed with this assignment and I don't understand it, can you help me? It might be too late to really get the help that we need. Whereas if we are, in the beginning couple weeks of class, we're like, ooh, this seems really hard. Let me go talk to a tutor. Let me go talk to my professor or department chair. Let me talk to somebody from counseling and advising. We can get that help, and we can, there goes the door, pivot much more easily than we can if we are waiting until the end and then we're scrambling. I also like to encourage people to not join everything. I know that, in our careers, as well as, in college, we want to be on committees, we want to be in clubs, we want to be an officer, we want those resume builders, and that stuff is great. But when we're joining 5 or 6 clubs, or we're being an officer in 3 or 4 different clubs, we're probably not being super effective in any of those roles. At least I know I certainly wouldn't be. Again, everyone has a different capacity, and that's why it's so important to know what you can handle. But if we're talking about resume builders, being able to say that, I was, on the board of this club, and these are the 5 things that we were able to accomplish when I was there, it's going to look a lot more impressive than, I was just part of these 5 or 6 different clubs. There's a lot of things out there. There's so much interesting, clubs. There's so many interesting committees, but we really need to make sure that we're not putting ourselves over our capacity. And when we are doing something, we're really making a difference in what it is that we are doing. So, okay, so I want you guys to take a second and drop in the chat for me. When I say the word self-care, what do you think that self-care means? When somebody's talking about self-care, not necessarily the things that you do for self-care, but what is self-care? So if you want to take a second and drop in the chat, what are the things that you think self-care are? Taking care of one's health and mental health and physical health, taking care of myself, learning to relax, having good, healthy habits. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a very self-explanatory term, right? Vacation. Oh, I would kill for a vacation right now. Vacation sounds fantastic. I was looking up flights today and thinking I can't go anywhere, but it'd be great too. Okay, yeah. Self-care, basically figuring out how to take care of yourself mentally, physically, and getting those good, healthy habits in. So the next thing I want you guys to drop in the chat for me is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you think self-care is? Oh, I see, improving one's own health. Yes, absolutely. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being self-care isn't important at all, 10 being self-care is the most important thing we can do. How important is self-care on that scale of 1 to 10? 8, 10, 10. Yeah. I think most people tend to recognize how important, another 10. Most people tend to recognize how important self-care is. You're here, this is probably not anybody's first self-care presentation. We know that it's important. But then the next question really is how much time do we actually spend on self-care? So again, drop in the chat, how many hours in a week would you say that you spend doing things that are dedicated just to self-care for yourself? 2 to 4 hours. Okay, not bad. 5 to 7, nice. 2 hours a day, in the morning and at night. All right. See, I am loving seeing more and more that people are actually taking that time for self-care. When I very first started at the college, people were like, I don't know, like 5 minutes a day. I don't actually do self-care. So it's wonderful to see that people are not only recognizing how important it is, but we're really making that time for ourselves. So awesome. I'm so glad to see that. Woo-hoo. If anyone's a Grey's Anatomy fan, I think I use this in like every presentation I do, but Christina Yang, in her beginning of her surgical career, just being so stressed. Should I sleep or should I shower? I could sleep in the shower, but I'm also starving. That's not great self-care when we're not able to do our hygiene, we're not able to get good sleep, and we're not able to eat anything. Forget about healthy and nutritious food, but eating anything. So, all right. So self-care. I mentioned earlier that, when we're doing stress management, we're doing self-care, knowing yourself is probably one of the most important things. When I, do presentations, when I do different events, when we're actually on campus, people always like to ask me, well, what's the best self-care thing that you can recommend? And my answer is always, well, what is it that you like? Because self-care is very individualized. There's not, I can't just say everyone should go and journal, because some people don't like writing. That's just not their thing. A lot of times I have so many students that love coloring, and even a lot of faculty and staff love coloring. But that is not a good coping skill for me. I get all like overly focused on it, and I get like really like obsessive about like coloring in the teeny little spots and like what colors. So it's like the opposite of relaxing for me. So it's really about knowing what it is that you like and what it is that is helpful for you. Part of that is really knowing, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? And when we talk about introvert versus extrovert, we're not talking about whether you like to be around people or be by yourself. It's about where you get your energy from. So I love being around my friends. I love doing stuff with them, pre-COVID, getting to, go out and, go to restaurants and things like that. Or currently, getting on Zoom and doing game night together. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. But when I get off Zoom or when I would get home from a restaurant, I'd be exhausted because I am very much an introvert. When I spend a lot of time with other people, I need like my own personal recovery time where I just sit on my couch or, read a book, hang out with my cats, maybe do some gardening by myself. But then other people, they don't like that alone time. They feel recharged after they go out with their friends or other people. So if you don't know where, your energy comes from, you might be trying to do all of these alone things and not feeling any more energized because, you don't realize, okay, maybe I'm not an introvert. Maybe I need to be around people. Maybe I need to have these Zoom game nights and things like that. And now that the weather's nice, maybe, going out for a walk with a friend or, outdoor dining or things along those lines. So knowing yourself is really helpful in that way. Some of the other things that we can do is scheduling self-care time. I always like to say, make a date with yourself and don't break that date, right? So if you say, I'm going to go to the gym, the gym is my self-care. I love working out. But then something else comes up, whether it's work or school related, making sure that we're not then canceling and saying, oh, well, the gym's not as important. Obviously if there's an emergent situation that comes up, there's always going to be times like that. But making sure that we're not canceling on ourselves all the time, because again, no one else is going to prioritize our mental health. So making sure that we're doing that. Self-care Sundays. Yeah, self-care Sundays is great. I love self-care Sundays. I like to do stuff on Saturday, and then Sunday I can just kind of like be. That's wonderful. And then making sure that we have a good work, school, life boundaries. I don't like talking about balance because there's always going to be times in our life where school is going to take precedence. Like once you start coming up on finals and you have papers and all that kind of stuff due, school is probably going to take up a lot more time than your personal time, right? And other times if somebody in your family is sick or you're feeling sick, your life stuff is going to take priority. But the important thing about boundaries is whatever that you're doing, you're being present in that activity. So if you're working on a paper, we're not also on Instagram or chatting with our friends, because if we're able to be present and be working on that paper, we're going to get it done a lot faster, right? Than if we're distracted. And same thing for when we're doing stuff in our personal life, not checking our work email, not thinking about all the different things that we have to do for, school or for work. If we need to write down a to-do list so we don't forget things, that's fine. but making sure that we are present in whatever it is that we're doing. And we need to be so extra intentional about that during COVID, because our workspace is our living space, is our school space. For many of us, I am very, very lucky that I have an extra bedroom in my place. And so I am able to have an office. But, many people don't have that luxury. So they might be in their kitchen or their living room trying to do these different things. And it can be really challenging, because then when you sit down in your kitchen for personal time, you're still kind of like, oh, I'm in this workspace. So making sure that whatever sort of boundaries we could make, even if we just have like a little corner that's like our workspace, making sure that we do that if we can. And also understanding that there are going to be some days that we're going to try to put these boundaries in place and it's not going to work. Something is going to come up, whether it's a sibling or a child, that needs something all the time, or again, an emergency comes up at work that you absolutely have to deal with on what normally would be your personal time. Those things are going to happen. But just making sure that we are not spending so much time doing those things when it's not an emergent situation, right? All right, so mindfulness. What is this thing, mindfulness, I've been talking about? Mindfulness is essentially paying attention on purpose. And I know that kind of sounds stupid easy, but it's actually something that's a lot harder than most people realize. We always tend to be thinking about what's going on in the future. What do I have to do? Or maybe what's gone on already in the past. We're ruminating on something that's already happened. But mindfulness is really about being in the moment and doing so without judgment. So noticing whatever emotion we're experiencing, whatever physical sensation we're experiencing, and saying that's okay. If you're feeling angry in a moment, or if you're feeling anxious in a moment, it's okay to feel anxious. We are all entitled to a range of emotions. We all experience those things. So mindfulness is really just about understanding what we're going through, not even necessarily trying to change what we're going through. There are different ways to practice mindfulness. We're going to be doing about 15-minute mindfulness meditation today, but there's also micro mindfulness minutes that we can do in our everyday life. And after we do our meditation, we'll talk a little bit more about some of those. Mindfulness is not the same as some other types of meditation. If anybody's ever done like a yoga class before, and at the end you kind of do that shavasana, and it's all about, clearing your mind and, maybe trying to lift yourself to a higher plane of being. But again, mindfulness is really just paying attention. And because this is a non-judgmental space, if our mind starts to wander, if we start thinking about what do I have to do when this activity is over, that's okay. It's then about noticing what is it that is taking my attention away from this meditation, and how do I redirect it? We could be mindful when we're cooking, cleaning, eating, walking, doing all sorts of different things. There's a lot of research that talks about mindfulness and how it can alleviate stress. I mentioned mindfulness isn't necessarily about changing our state, but the more we practice mindfulness, the more it can help with that stress without us necessarily having to say, relax, relax, relax. Our body will just kind of naturally go into that state as we practice that mindfulness. There are some limitations to mindfulness. It is not some magical cure-all. I wish it were. One day I will find the magical cure-all, whether out there for all stress, but not quite yet. It's not a replacement for medical or mental health treatment. So, if you have depression, if you have anxiety, mindfulness is a great tool that we can use to help us combat those different things. But it's not going to replace seeing a therapist. It's not going to replace medication. It's just one tool out of many that we might be using. If you have experienced trauma, whether physical or emotional trauma, paying too close attention to our body can sometimes lead to a dissociative response, a freeze response, and we can kind of get stuck in those emotional or physical wounds. So if you do have any sort of trauma experiences, feel free to just kind of listen and follow along with what we're doing, but be careful not to really get into the mindfulness practice. Mindfulness can still be great used with individuals who have dealt with trauma, but it's important to do so under the care of a doctor where you can work through some of those things together and make sure that you're not getting stuck in that place. Yeah, are there any questions about mindfulness before we go into our guided meditation? All right, cool. So if everyone wants to just make sure you put yourself on mute for this so there's no background noise. But we are going to just be doing this 15-minute meditation. The voice is going to guide us through it. Barkay, you're probably very familiar with this. And Stephanie, I think you've heard this one before as well. But yeah, just kind of get comfortable. Close your eyes. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, you can kind of gaze down at the floor and just follow along. Everyone hear that?
This next practice is a breathing meditation. In this style of meditation, we focus on breathing not because there's anything special about it, but because that physical sensation of breathing is always there. Throughout the practice, you may find yourself caught up in thoughts, emotions, sounds. Wherever your mind goes, simply come back again to the next breath. If you're distracted the entire time and come back just once, that's perfect. Sit comfortably. Find yourself a stable position you can maintain for a while, either lying on the floor or a bed or sitting in a chair. Close your eyes if you like, or you can choose to leave them open and gaze downward towards the floor. And then draw your attention now to the physical sensation of breathing, perhaps noticing the always present rising and falling of your abdomen or your chest. Perhaps instead noticing the air moving in and out through your nose or mouth. With each breath, bring attention to these sensations. There's nothing you need to do or make happen. And if you like, mentally note breathing in and breathing out. Many times over, you'll get distracted by thoughts or feelings. You may feel distracted more often than not. That's normal. There's no need to block or eliminate thinking or anything else. Without giving yourself a hard time or expecting anything different to happen, when you discover that your attention has wandered, Notice whatever's distracted you and then come back again to the breath. Breathing in and breathing out. There's no need to strive to make yourself feel anything special or to get anywhere or to block anything out. There's not even a goal of relaxation. That may happen, but you can't force yourself into feeling anything at all. Simply noticing each time you find your attention somewhere else and returning it gently back again to your breath. Practice as well pausing before making any physical adjustments, such as moving your body or even scratching an itch. It's always okay to take care of yourself, and with intention, shift at a moment you choose, allowing a space between whatever it is you're experiencing and what you choose to do next. And wherever your mind is right now, returning again to the next breath. You may find your mind wandering constantly, caught up in a whirlwind. That's normal too. Instead of wrestling with or engaging with those thoughts as much, practice observing, noting wherever your attention has been, and then returning again to the physical sensation of breathing. Don't try to hold on too tightly to the sensation of breathing either. If you feel yourself straining or tight, let go. Ease up a little. The mind will remain busy whatever you do. Seek balance. If you find yourself mostly daydreaming and often fantasy, devote a little effort to maintaining your focus. Let go of any sense of trying to make something happen. For these few minutes, create an opportunity to not plan or not fix or whatever else is your habit. Breathing in and breathing out, returning your attention to the breath each time it wanders elsewhere. If you find yourself distracted through most of the practice and come back to just one breath, that's perfect. Continue to practice observing without needing to react. Just sit and pay attention as best as you're able. As hard as it is to maintain, that's all there is. Come back over and over again without judgment for yourself or expectation. So continuing to practice, note wherever your mind is right now and come back again to breathing. Breathing in and breathing out. And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes. Take a moment and notice any sounds in the environment. Notice how your body feels right now. Notice your thoughts. And emotions. And then pausing for a moment, decide how it is you'd like to continue on with your day.
Okay. So does anyone want to share what they thought about the experience? It can be positive, it can be negative. I do not take it personally if you hate it or if you love it. Yeah, go ahead.
I enjoyed it because like it helped me like take some stress out, like do the classes and that stuff.
Great, great. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Say, I tend to do this one a lot. We have Mindful Mondays every Monday during the semester from 12 to 12:15 on Zoom. And this is pretty much the meditation we use most times. And I tend to be much more focused on Mindful Mondays, but since I'm in the middle of a presentation, I noticed today my brain was kind of a little all over the place. But again, that's the point of mindfulness. That's fine that I was more distracted today. And that's one of the things I love about mindfulness is that non-judgmental part of things. Was anyone not a fan? Cool. All right. Well, I put the link to that particular meditation in the chat in case anyone wants to try it on their own. Mindful.org is actually a really wonderful resource in general. There's so many different types of meditations they have, body scans, like nature meditations. It's really wonderful. And a good chunk of their stuff is free. So yay for free. That's the way I like my stuff. Okay. So how can we apply this mindfulness into our daily lives? Obviously, we can do these types of meditations. They have meditations that are as short as 3 to 5 minutes. They have meditations that are a full hour. I cannot stay focused for that long. 15 minutes seems to be my personal sweet spot. They also have ones that there's not so much talking during it. You don't even need a guide to do this meditation. Personally, because my brain wanders, I like it because it reminds me of what I'm supposed to be doing. But other people don't particularly like the guided aspect of it. And either is fine. It's all about what you enjoy. But some of the things that we can do during our daily routine, we can actually apply mindfulness to. So whether that's, at certain points during the day, we kind of take a minute, take a few mindful breaths. It doesn't even need to be for an entire minute, just 3 to 5 mindful breaths before we continue on to whatever else it is we need to do. Being mindful is we're performing different tasks. I always like to use the example of when we were on campus. I live over in Anne Arundel County, so my commute's about an hour and 15 minutes each way. And there are definitely mornings where I would get to my office and be like, how did I get here? And it wasn't that I was like falling asleep at the wheel. It's just because we get into this routine, we kind of go on autopilot where we're not really thinking about what we're doing. So we can drive mindfully, really be present in that. When we're eating, so often when we're busy, we just kind of shovel food down our throat and keep it moving. But when we can, really stopping and slowing down when we eat, really thinking about, am I enjoying this meal? And because again, when you got a good meal in front of you, you want to enjoy it, right? Showering. I love the shower is like the most relaxing place in the world for me. So it's nice to be able to, really just again, slow down. Like I have these, oh God, it's kind of like a bath bomb, but it's made for the shower. So like your whole shower starts filling with like essential oils and like, again, just being able to kind of tune into your 5 senses is another really great way to apply mindfulness. Kind of, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? And for me personally, smell is a huge sense for me. That's a really good one for me. So whatever it is that you like, it might be you enjoy candles and watching the flame on a candle, so it can be very individualized. Like I mentioned, taking 3 breaths when we're switching between areas of our life. So when you're finished with your schoolwork and you're ready to go and do some of your personal life stuff, before you get up and move, just kind of closing your eyes, taking a couple of deep breaths, and then kind of getting yourself into that mode of, okay, work is done or school is done and it's put away for now. Let me go and focus on the other stuff in my life. We mentioned earlier, just checking in with our body, at different points during the day, kind of say, how am I feeling? Am I hungry? Am I tense? Is my jaw clenched? That's another one that a lot of people, when they're feeling stressed, they find that, their teeth are locked or their tongue is like glued to the roof of their mouth, and you're very tight in this area. Checking in with our posture. How are we sitting? I'm in like the worst possible chair for like working long term. It's so comfortable, but my posture is awful. So again, checking in with our physical self, not just our emotional self. Another great way to apply mindfulness is how we interact with other people. We, as a society, I find, tend to listen to people in order to respond to what they're saying, as opposed to actually listening to really understand what they're saying. So we can even apply mindfulness in our conversations with our friends and our family members or our coworkers, really making eye contact, and being there and being present in that moment and not thinking about like, oh, I, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when I'm hanging out with my friends, I like to put my phone elsewhere. I have friends that are like, oh, why don't you get an Apple Watch? And I'm like, because I don't even want, like, if my phone's away, I do not want notifications. I don't want to know anything about it. Obviously not all the time, but, really being able to be present sometimes. Gratitude is another great way that we can really apply mindfulness. When things are happening during the day, especially if something negative happens, it can tend to kind of color the whole way we've seen the day. So even if everything was pretty much fine and we had one like bad 5-minute thing that happens, thinking about like, we're like, oh, it was such a terrible day, but was it a terrible day? So using gratitude as a way to kind of go back and take inventory of your day, how was it really? What are the things today that I was grateful for? So even though this, not great thing happened, what are maybe 2 or 3 great things that did happen? Again, 5 senses, whatever it is that you like. If, I think pretty much most of us are doing any online shopping, if we're doing any shopping. So, the bubble wrap that comes with stuff, that could be really fun to pop and something that we can really do mindfully, or playing with Play-Doh. There are also a lot of really great mindfulness apps that are free. One that I found not too long ago is called Breathe, Breethe. And again, it was another free one. It was one I found during the election because they actually had political themed mindfulness meditations, not like geared toward a political party, but like, how do we separate ourselves from all the politics that are, going on, mindfulness in that way. And I'm like, yes. I was like, I need a break from politics for a few minutes. So that was a really great app for that as well. So, and some of these apps, it's great because they will actually like, send you a reminder on your phone, like take 3 breaths, throughout the course of the day. So that's a nice reminder if you're like me and you tend to get wrapped up in what you're doing. So that is the end of the content that I have for you all, but we have a couple minutes if anybody has any questions. I also mentioned our Mindful Mondays, which again, will be going on, I believe, through the week of May 3rd. So if anybody would like to join us, we are there every week from 12 to 12:15. But are there any other questions that anybody has?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, like if like when a family member like passes away, is that like an example of stress or just depression? Like, what is that?
Oh, absolutely. Grief is definitely a stressor that we experience. Grief is something that we actually or bereavement is something that we tend to separate from depression, just because we expect people to be depressed when they are, grieving. So we don't want to say, oh, you have depression just because somebody has passed away. Now, some people, the bereavement goes on for an extended period of time, and it can become depression, especially if the person has dealt with depression before. But generally, that's not, what's going on. It is a stressor. It's something that, can really bring up a lot of those physical and emotional, signs that we talked about. But those are things that we absolutely 100% expect to see when somebody loses a loved one. So, we don't necessarily get, worried and say, oh my gosh, you need to 100% be in treatment. Although, again, seeing a therapist after the death of a loved one is a wonderful support, that we can have in our tool belt as well. A lot of people think that we only go to therapy when something's wrong, but really, going to therapy when things are going okay is good too. So I hope that answered your question. Okay, great. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. I have recorded this and I'm going to be posting it on the Shaw Center's YouTube page. So if anybody is like, oh my gosh, I wish I could show this to somebody, please feel free to do so. Or if you feel like, oh, I need a little refresher, at some point in time, this will be there. I mentioned in the chat, I put the link to the mindfulness meditation we did. I also just put in the link for the Mindful Monday. So if you want to copy that and join us on Monday, I will be there at noon. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, I think you all have my email address. So feel free, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to help in any way I can. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
My other question is, how the sleep event, how we got something? Is there something we're gonna get for the stress event?
I'm sorry?
How we got those the tea stuff from the sleep event?
Oh yeah. So we don't have any sleepy bags or anything like that from today, unfortunately. But I hope you liked all the stuff with the sleep bag and everything.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But I will definitely keep that in mind for next time I do this presentation, that maybe I can find a nice little stress relief bag to put together for you guys.
Okay.
All right. Have a good afternoon.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.